Okay, so here's the deal. Let's just get right into this because it's important. It's a major rule change. When I say it's a major rule change, it's one of the rules that we use for the 5-step sequential process. What is the 5-step sequential process? It's the 5 elements that we use as legal folk to figure out if somebody is disabled. If somebody is found disabled, and then we have to see if they're still disabled, we use the 8-step sequential process. But at the initial trying to figure out if this person is disabled, we use 5 elements. And element 4, simple question: can the person do their past relevant work? That's the work they've done within the past 15 years. Well, they want to change that. That's known as the PRW element or the past relevant work element. I'm going to read you directly from the Federal Register, which was submitted by the SSA as part of a proposal to change this rule. Here is the proposed change. We propose to reduce the PRW period from the current 15 years to 5 years. In many cases, this revision will reduce the number of jobs in an individual's work history that we will consider at step 4 of the sequential evaluation process, the 5-step process. Okay, when we determine whether an individual can perform their past relevant work. At step 5, this revision will also change the previous work experience that we will consider under the medical vocational guidelines. Because a step 4 finding can result in a denial but not an allowance, okay, in fiscal year 2022, a total of 5.8% of decisions for adult claimants were denials at step 4. Ultimately, they anticipate that they will make proportionally fewer denial decisions at step 4 and proportionally more decisions, potentially denials, they didn't put that in, at step 5. Because step 5 decisions require us to also consider work in the national economy, an individual can perform based on their RFC or residual functional capacity and vocational factors as well. We expect that shifting decisions from step 4 to step 5 with less past work considered will result in more allowance decisions. We propose to make this decision under 20 CFR 404.1560, among others. We also propose to remove a current sentence in 20 CFR 404.1565 that explains the intent of our work experience rules is to ensure that remote work experience is not currently applied. They're getting rid of that. So now they can add remote work as an option, which will massively, massively increase the amount of denials we see. We propose to remove this sentence to reflect that the arduous unskilled work profile and the lifetime commitment profile consider work history for a period longer than the proposed 5-year relevant work period. It'll have other effects as well. All right. We can go through the justification of change, but I want to go through some basics here real quick. And we can go through their reading and do that stuff, but here's what you need to know. Number 1, okay, changing the 15-year to the 5-year is easier on the claimant because most claimants have no friggin' clue what they've done after 10 years. They definitely know what they've done within the past 5 years, but a lot of these claimants, they've had 40, 50 jobs. Could have been a labor job, could have been a commercial construction job, could have been an industrial job, whatever. You do have people who have worked the same industry and the same job for their entire life or the past 30 years, so they're going to know what they did. But that's not the majority. In fact, it's those people who worked the same job for the past 30 years that always put the snippy comments in the comment section where they're like, I don't understand. Somebody can't understand what they're doing for the past 15 years. That's so easy to understand. What the hell? The thing is, if you haven't worked labor ready oriented jobs where you're cleaning up convention centers, and then the next day you're basically working and digging a hole, and then the next day you're basically helping with construction cleanup of concrete. If you haven't had those jobs and a zillion of those jobs over a 15-year period, you don't get it. It's just hard to remember all of them. Now, with that said, and all this thing going on, if we have essentially the past 5 years, the SSA knows that within the past 5 years of somebody working, a lot of those individuals will have their most skilled work. Because, right, the farther you go in life, the more high paying, the more high skilled work you're going to be doing, right? So they know they're going to get you on more high skilled work that they can hold against you because you've been trained, you have more transferable skilled jobs, etc. Unless you're an individual where the advantage will go your way, where you've ramped down over a 5-year period to lesser jobs because you couldn't do that more difficult job that you had, and you ramped down over 5 years basically to the point where you just couldn't do that big time job that you'd worked up to. Then the advantage will be yours because the transferable skills won't be there, because the higher level reasoning and the math and this and that, it just won't be there. So that's interesting. Now, with that said, the vocational experts and the judges will have to do less analysis, right? They'll have to consider fewer jobs. They'll have to go, they won't have to go as far back when it comes to essentially, bottom line, all the jobs you've done and all the earnings you've had and the IRS earnings and this and that. So at the end of the day, what's interesting, about this is that, okay, all right. So bottom line, they get to do less work too. So they're pretty happy about that. And then there's another thing too. This shifts a lot of decisions away from step 4 because they're going to find that most people can't do their past work because there's way fewer jobs. If you're considering 15 years, there might be some simple jobs in there that they could say that you were able to do, right? But if it's only a 5-year period, they're probably not going to find as many jobs and as many opportunities to deny you over them, which means they're going to throw all this stuff into step 4. Step 5. Element 5, step 5 is the cleaver element. That is the element where they take a giant axe and just boom, slam it on your file and just wreck your claim. That is the cleaver element. Okay. And what they're doing is they're shifting more decisions over to that particular element. And the reason why is that ultimately, at the end of the day, whether you get a denial at step 4 or denial at step 5 still equates to a denial. T-Paw, you got to catch up with me. I'm super glad. Also, super thank you for the donation. Super glad, but you got to catch up with me. Awesome. Thank you. Yes, catch up with me soon. Very good. Very good. Let me little heart there on that thingy. That's perfect. So with that said, what you need to keep in mind with this whole situation is that they're making it essentially easier for them to get through the 5-step sequential process to the final element. But then in the final element, they're still going to have a lot of power to deny people. Why is that? Well, all they have to prove at element 5, all they got to prove is that there's some job in the national economy that you could work that is just slightly over part-time work, just slightly over. And if they can prove that with enough jobs in the national economy, then they can find you not disabled. Now, I can go through essentially a lot of the write-up and things like that, but at the end of the day, certain types of claims are going to be found more easily disabled, and more claims, in my opinion, are going to be found not disabled. Here's why. Vocational allowances. The only reason you ever go to element 5 is to get a vocational allowance. What is a vocational allowance? All right. Got 5 elements of disability. Got 4 main ways people are found disabled. Way number 1 is it's a terminal type of claim, or it's a compassion allowance listing type of claim, which is what a lot of these terminal claims end up being. Those are the extreme people. They're going to pass away. So we're not focusing on that. Option number 2 on our 4 options. Option number 2 is that you meet, equal, or exceed a listing. That's where one of your impairments is so bad, it's so severe, that it falls within the same medical equivalency of a predefined list of impairments. Option number 3. Option number 3 is that basically, at the end of the day, you can potentially grid out if you're older, right? So if you're older, your education is lesser, you have no transferable work skills, things like that, the higher the likelihood that you could just grid out. Cool. Number 4 on the ways to be found disabled, the vocational allowance. This little guy right over here. The vocational allowance is the weakest form of an approval. It's where all of your impairments equate to an inability to go ahead and work a job that's slightly above part-time labor. It's the weakest kind of approval that you can get. What does that mean? It means that when you go through the 5 elements, element number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? You get to the final element. Are there any jobs in the national economy that you could potentially do slightly above part-time labor? Hence why they call it a vocational allowance, because they're saying there are no jobs in the national economy at all that you could potentially do at full-time work, full-time labor. So what's interesting is I think that we're seeing the beginnings of a shift towards more step 5 denials. And more step 5 denials means that they change the language of essentially the jobs that you've had, and they open it up more to more modern types of jobs. So let's say that there's a job, right? And this job would normally require you to drive to work, would require you to be in an office setting around other people, etc. Well, if they change that job to get rid of the driving to work and being around others, then that job becomes significantly easier and is actually more consistent with modern day, because all these jobs you can do them from home. You have a computer, you can do them. So the point is, if they're able to change the DOT style of adjudications that we do, they'll be able to go ahead and deny a lot more people. And they can deny a lot more people then because the jobs will become more easy. You won't be interacting with the general public. You won't be interacting with bosses and coworkers all the time. You won't be in an office-like setting. And as a result of that, if you're at home and doing things through the telephone, doing things through the fax, doing things through the email, they'll be able to say that you, with your limitations, could still do those things. Because remember, it's all a limitation game. You could have impairments, but it's the limitations that result from those impairments that keep you from doing work. That right there is the defining factor as to whether or not you can get a vocational allowance. That's the major rule change. I hope you guys are doing well. I'm going to go ahead and basically prep some more stuff for Sweetie, get some stuff ready for her. We did have some stuff get received today. I did go ahead and start cooking steak for her. I want to make sure that for her surgery, she has the food that she loves. So grilled up a bunch of steak, froze it in the freezer. I will catch you guys a little bit later. Please remember to like and subscribe to the channel. You have a wonderful, wonderful night, and we will go from there. All right. I'll catch you a little bit later, and thank you so much. All right. Bye-bye, everybody. Bye-bye. Oh, there we go. And boom.